Hello, I'm Sudarshana Starshine Star. How are you guys doing? It's such a beautiful Friday. It's May 30th, 2025. I have a YouTube channel called It's the Dazzling of the Light, or you can just type in at Sudarshana Starshine Star. I have over 200 clips there on a variety of topics. They're very interesting, pretty juicy and spicy. I don't really do mediocre, boring, middle of the road stuff. That's just not my style. And why don't you go ahead and join my YouTube channel? And remember to like, share, and subscribe or hit the notification bell. Thank you in advance. I really appreciate you. I begin all of my clips with the 3 opening prayers, which are in Sanskrit and Telugu, and they are short. This is to bless, protect, uplift, and purify you, me, and this clip. They are the Guru Mantra, the Ganesha Mantra, and the Gayatri Mantra. Om. Om, Om, Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwaraha, Guru Sakshat Parabrahmam, Tasmahi Sri Guruve Namaha. Om Suklam Bharataram Vishnum, Sashivarnam Chatobhujam, Prasanavaranam Dhyaye Sarva Vignupashantaye. Om Bhur Bhuvasuvaha Tatsavitur Varinyam Bhako Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Naha Prachodayat. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Excellent. Well, I have a really good one here for you guys today. I find it very interesting, and I really like it. This is, first of all, I'm going to just, let's see, where did I put this? I'm going to just reflect just a little bit on the issue with President Trump and his victories with the mainstream media. If you remember, not long ago, CBS surrendered to President Trump and they were forced to pay him, first let me talk about ABC. ABC settled with President Trump, and George Stephanopoulos and ABC had to apologize to President Trump for defamation because they were saying that he was R-A-P-I-N-G, which was completely untrue. So they had to pay $15 million to settle the defamation suit. And that was all donated to a charity, a charitable contribution to President Trump's museum. And now CBS, whose parent company is Paramount, and President Trump has been suing them for $20 billion for the... They were caught red-handed editing Kamala's interview right during the election season, changing Kamala's answers to making Kamala Harris appear to be intelligent and giving answers that looked very favorable for Kamala Harris, and those were not Kamala Harris's answers. If you notice, I'm not using any pronouns here. Maybe I should. That's not the original Kamala Harris, by the way. The original Kamala Harris was named Kamal Arush and was a biological male, and whose father was a general in the satanic Senussi army out of Libya, and his father trained also in Baltimore, Maryland. I wish I could show these pictures here when I'm on YouTube. I've shown it on my other social medias over the years. It's very obvious. It's very obvious several years ago when Kamal Arush, who was going by Kamala Harris, was picked up by the White Hats and given a military tribunal for crimes against humanity and treason. And that being is not around. There was a crazy sub that came in, like the most crazy double that looked like a clown face several years ago. And people were like, what the heck happened to Kamala? Took a while to adjust that and to be looking more like a a good facsimile of Kamala Harris. But there have been a variety of actors playing the double or wearing the face mask for Kamala. So anyway, President Trump has a $20 million lawsuit against CBS, and their parent company, Paramount, is very nervous because they're trying to do a merger with Skydance Media, and they know that President Trump, as president, has influence over the FCC and can really make a problem for them with that merger if he chooses to. So they're saying, oh, could we settle for $15 million? And he said, no way. It has to be at least $25 million, and you have to also apologize on air, make a public apology about what you did. So the victories are, for the people who don't understand that nothing can stop what is coming, this is far above politics. This is the great cleanup of the earth realm, of all the dark, cult, satanic, you can call it Illuminati, you can call it infiltrated Luciferian Freemasons, you can call it Khazarian Mafia, you can call it the 13 satanic papal ruling bloodline families that were out of Venice and Rome, connected directly to the Vatican, always have been. You can call it Jesuit. You can call it the Cabal. There's so many names and so many little branches off the satanic tree. But anyway, it's very good news. So I'm going to go into, though, something that I find... oh, yes, and I forgot to also mention that President Trump also won his lawsuit with the Pulitzer Prize Board, and the New York Times and the Washington Post must give their prizes back to the Pulitzer Board. They won Pulitzer prizes for fake news, for fake reporting about Russia, told so many lies. President Trump won that lawsuit, and Pulitzer Board is taking back the Pulitzer Prizes from the New York Times and the Washington Post, which is fantastic. Hallelujah. Don't read those rags. All right. This is going to be about a really great source on this. Robert, I don't think I'm going to be pronouncing his name correctly. Robert Gouveia Esquire. And it's all about how just yesterday, the President Trump's tariffs that were had a permanent ban put on them by three unknown judges on these little courts that believe that they are president and have executive order, and they're so incorrect. But they tried to put a ban on it to make it to make every single tariff just stop dead in its tracks. So President Trump's administration went right around and presented a case to the appeals court, and just very shortly yesterday it was flipped back again, so that Trump's tariffs are back full in force. There was what is called a pause put on it, though, so there's going to be more legal work and things done to finally fully iron this how this is just such a great bunch of in-depth stuff to understand how they were able to do that, and what President Trump and his administration and his lawyers presented to get the appeals court to flip it again. So that's what this is about. And let me read this. Liberals all over the country screeching in joy because of a tariff victory. I saw a bunch of them, like Tish, she's talking about Letitia James, and Hochul, Kathy Hochul out of New York, doing backflips and cartwheels because our country can continue to be hollowed out without any tariffs. And then the reversal of fortune has come. We get a bunch of tariff updates today, quick preview, and this was from yesterday. This is the conclusion of the tariff order that came out from the International Trade Corps, and we'll go through it, but not before we see what came down from the Court of Appeals. In very short order, they said, you guys are stayed. Your little ruling there, not going to be in effect for the time being. And we'll see what Trump said, because Trump and the DOJ, Department of Justice, Man, they filed this immediately, an emergency motion for a stay pending the appeal, and so we'll see what their arguments were and why the Court of Appeals found that there's some merit to what they had to say, and has at least paused the cancellation of the tariffs for the time being. So we're excited about that. We'll go through it. Lots of reading to do. You can see this one's a nice 124 pages here. We'll hit the highlights and see what else is in the record. But all that's coming up before we turn our attention to what's happening with some of Trump's officials. I'm laughing. I'm on a partial outdoor, open outdoor terrace on a beautiful day. And I always take it as a, I don't take anything that's an accident when I do these recordings. And there was a motorcycle that was just almost doing donut eights that was ripping around the corners. And I say thank you for that. It's like revving up the engines, like brum, brum. Yes, I agree. So National Economic Council Director was speaking about this, Peter Navarro. He came out and Carolyn Leavitt was delivering some serious conversational points today out at the White House press briefing room. So we'll spend some time there on the tariffs. It is the big story on the day. So good news coming out from the Court of Appeals. Repeat. Trump's tariffs are back. The liberals were celebrating the demise of one of Trump's key foreign policy tools being ripped away by unelected federal judges. But that was very short-lived because this order has now come down from the United States Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit, and it's saying, hey, you three judges who said that Trump doesn't have the power to issue tariffs even though Congress gave him that power in the law, you are stayed, and the tariffs will remain in effect until further notice. Let's see exactly what was sent in by the Trump DOJ. You can see this one was the emergency motion that was coming in to stay this order from the lower level court. And that order was a whopper. Okay, it was a 49-pager. And this, if we go to the top, you'll see this was decided by 3 judges, Gary Katzman, Timothy Reif, and Ristiani. And actually 2 of these were appointed. One of these judges was appointed by Trump, another one was appointed by Reagan, and another one was appointed, I believe, by Obama. But this was a big lawsuit filed in this bizarre court called the United States Court of International Trade. And they came out with a big fat opinion. It's all stayed now. What they say the crux of this is about that Congress ultimately delegated too much power to Trump. They said, well, there's this thing called the non-delegation doctrine, and Congress can't give up all of its powers over to the executive branch. And Congress did a lot of that with the tariffs, and so they basically just said, well, we think Congress didn't mean to delegate as much as Trump has taken from them. And they said that this is the basis for the cancellation of the tariffs. In other words, Trump didn't have the power, he took too much, then Congress delegated. We're going to see why that is wrong and why Congress gave him a ton of power, because they're too weak and feckless to do anything about this, which is why they gave the tariff power to the president. The other main issue here is that they just apparently don't think that Trump's justifications for the tariffs meet the standard that is necessary to declare an emergency or to do something to impose these global tariffs. And so the court's really substituting its opinion for Trump's opinion, saying, well, we think you did more than you're allowed to do. In other words, they're not reading it with a benefit to Trump, not reading it saying, if the law gives you the argument that you can do that, then you are with the confines of the law. It's not saying what the law is or whether this is a possibility or feasible under the law. The law is substituting feasible under the law, it's substituting their judgment, saying we don't like your decision because the ramifications are too broad, the economic consequences are too big, and we have to round you up. So, here was what they wrote in conclusion from the trade court. They said the court holds for the foregoing reasons that the law, the IEEPA, okay, Trump is going to respond to this, be successful, as we will see. The lower court judge says it does not authorize any of Trump's tariffs worldwide. Any tariffs, retaliatory tariffs, or even the tariffs that were targeting the trafficking of illicit materials into our country. The worldwide and retaliatory tariff orders exceed any authority granted to the president by the law to regulate these means of tariffs, which is like ridiculous. Come on. Exceed any authority? Give me a break. The trafficking tariffs also fail because they don't deal with the threat set forth in the orders. Okay, so the judge is substituting their opinion for it. Trump says, we're going to hit China with tariffs because they're sending in fentanyl to Canada and to Mexico. And they say, well, no, you can't do that because the tariffs in China or the tariffs on Mexico and Canada aren't going to do anything to stop people from unaliving of fentanyl in the United States. And these judges just substitute their conclusion on that chain for Trump's, but they're not elected. They're not in the Department of Homeland Security. They don't run the Secretary of State's office, so they just substitute their conclusions. They say, well, we don't think his policy is going to address the threats, and so therefore it's just not related enough. Now, this conclusion entitles the people suing the VOS company to judgment as a matter of law. The court further finds that there's no dispute of any material fact. And so everything Trump claims about trafficking, about national security, about having our industries hollowed out, and all that stuff is really irrelevant. They just say, nope, it's not. It's factually incorrect. It's factually inaccurate. And so they're going to enter summary judgment against the United States, which is just wild, because historically you would have had this deference to other branches of government. You'd say, let me just read the law. If you can, you might disagree with Trump's policy. You might disagree with the decision, but if you read it in conjunction with the law and you say, yeah, it fits, I may not like it, but it fits. That's what judicial review is. Judicial review is not judicial FU, where you get to say, this is my policy that I don't like, and I'm going to substitute my policy for your policy. In other words, if Trump says we're going to use tariffs because people are dropping and being unalived of fentanyl overdoses, and it's being poured in through our borders, a judge doesn't have the ability to undermine that conclusion because he doesn't like it. So here they write, there is no question here of narrowly tailored relief if the challenged order are unlawful to the plaintiff, they're unlawful to everybody. So not only the person who is suing, they win, everybody wins. All the tariffs everywhere are invalidated. Says, all of their duties and impost come from the United States. They need to be uniform, and this court is just rich because they're constantly citing the Constitution as they crap all over it. But Article 1, Section 8, it was essentially delegated over to the executive branch by the IEEPA, and so they default back to the Constitution when it's convenient for them and ignore it when it's not. Plaintiff's motion for summary judgment is hereby granted by the panel, and the motion is denied as moot. So you win. Like you don't even have to fight this any further. You win as a matter of course, and that is what dropped. Now, obviously, the Court of Appeals put a big fat stay on that, but not before they got the filing from President Trump and the DOJ. You can see, here's what they dropped on appeal from the terrible trade order that came down from the Court on International Trade. Trump appeals this, filing his emergency motion for a stay pending appeal and seeking an immediate administrative stay. And he won on this. Here's what the argument was. All right, Court of Appeals, you're not going to believe this. Yesterday evening, the Court of International Trade, called the SIT, issued an unprecedented and legally indefensible injunction permanently barring the United States from implementing tariffs involving dozens of countries from the UK to the People's Republic of China to the EU. And these are tariffs that are central to the president's foreign policy and economic agendas. Now, the court permanently enjoined the president's executive orders regarding all the tariffs and compelled the executive branch to issue administrative orders unwinding the tariffs in 10 days. Undo everything because the president is no longer the president. They write this. Court of Appeals should immediately stay that judgment, and they did, which is rife with legal error, and it upends the president's effort to eliminate our exploding trade deficit and reorient the global economy so it's an equal footing. Now, the injunction from these lower court judges unilaterally disarms the United States. And this is what was so irritating when all the lefties like Kathy Hochul and Letitia James and Chris Mays from Arizona, when they were all out here, they were celebrating this. Yeah, perfect. We can keep hollowing out our industries in favor of foreign crap in America and doubling down on the hollowing out of the working class. And it's wild to watch the Democrats double down on that in spite of everything. But that's what these judges did, unilaterally disarm. Said, the president doesn't have the right to do this. Didn't even try to find in his favor. Didn't even wait on briefing. Just summary judgment. Nope. Trump's tariffs are canceled. Says this is being done in the face of long-standing predatory trade practices of other countries who, notwithstanding the injunction, are free to impose punitive tariffs on the U.S. So the court says, wait a minute. They can hit us with tariffs, but you can't hit them back. Are they looking out for America at all, or just looking out for their bottom lines? The injunction threatens to unwind months of foreign policy decision-making and sensitive diplomatic negotiations at the expense of the nation's economic well-being and our national security. Now, the political branches, not the courts, make foreign policy and chart economic policy, right? The courts are not set up for this, but the injunction inserts and injects the sick group, the court, into the center of the nation's foreign policy. They run things now, and they disabled the president from using a critical tool we all knew he was going to use. He talked about it on the way in. And that Congress even authorized him to wield because Congress doesn't want to handle tariffs. They can't handle anything. They can't even pass a budget in the middle of time-sensitive negotiations with multiple foreign countries over future trade agreements. Now, Trump's DOJ explains, so grave are the stakes for our country, the nation, that 4 members of the president's cabinet took the extraordinary step of submitting declarations to the trade court before its ruling, substantially the immediate catastrophic harms that would flow if they stopped the president's tariff authority. They don't care. That's the job. That's the whole. They're like, oh, it's going to wreck a bunch of his work? Perfect. We'll all sign it. The Secretary of Commerce came in and explained that an injunction would undermine recent agreements and would jeopardize the dozens of similar arrangements that are being negotiated. Scott Bessent, Treasury Secretary, he agreed. He said, if you issue an injunction on these tariffs, it could shatter ongoing negotiations with dozens of countries and even embolden others to retaliate against the United States. The U.S. Trade Representative, who also submitted a declaration, sent this into the court, who didn't care. They said an injunction would leave trading partners free to further distort the conditions of competition for U.S. exporters. Everybody else can punch us in the face, but we have to just stand there and take it. And if we want to defend ourselves with tariffs, courts say, you can't do that. Just eat it, America. Just like they want you to eat the gangbangers who are eliminating our kids. And the Secretary of State warned that an injunction would cause significant and irreparable harm. Rubio said this specifically to the court. That's Secretary of State Marco Rubio. They don't care if the injunction remains in effect. The successful agreements the president has reached with multiple countries could be immediately unraveled. But remarkably, Trump's DOJ says to the Court of Appeals, the lower level court, the 3 of them, they issued a permanent injunction, and they didn't even consider these declarations. This documents quintessential irreparable harms to the government, and they didn't even read it. nor did the court even discuss the equitable requirements for even issuing a permanent injunction. They didn't do any analysis before they issued the injunction. On the merits, the injunction rests on a dangerously flawed interpretation of the tariff authority that the president has since 1941. They educate them. Congress has authorized the president to regulate importation of foreign goods whenever he declares a national emergency in the law. This court's predecessor, in fact, in an opinion by this court's first chief judge, upheld President Nixon's invocation of that authority to impose broad tariffs in response to a global balance of payments deficit. That was done in 1975. You guys wrote about it. Did you forget about that? And Congress knew of that holding when it incorporated the operative statutory language into the new statute, which gives the president essentially the same power that was decided back in 1984 and also referenced in 1981. Remember when you said that? Now, it's difficult to imagine, they say. Court of Appeals, how these dumb judges could ignore all of this. We can't even imagine a clearer authority for the president to invoke the current statute, which is the IEEPA, to impose the exact same sort of tariffs that Nixon imposed, like Nixon did it. Congress updated the statute and said, yeah, great job. You can do that clearly and put it in the law. So they're doing it. But the court flouting that prior precedent stopped Trump's tariffs so that even though Trump determined those tariffs are imperative to protect our economy and our national security, now is stay pending appeal, which is what they're asking for, and they got. And on immediate stay are necessary, and an immediate stay is necessary to prevent irreparable harm to our whole country that those three judges sought to impose. And a stay is not going to harm them at all. And a stay is not going to harm them at all who can be made whole through a refund. If they say, well, we paid more for our products coming in or whatever, we'll just pay them the difference. You don't get to invalidate every single tariff nationwide because some party was complaining and you didn't even analyze whether an injunction was appropriate under the traditional factors, saying, we'll just pay them the difference. Absent at least interim relief from this court, the United States is also going to seek Supreme Court relief if you don't grant this to avoid irreparable national security and economic harms. Now, of course, the anti-tariff people are opposing the motion, and we continue. Background. Trump's DOJ, writing to the Court of Appeals, Federal Circuit, says, all right, Congress has long delegated to the president the authority to regulate imports during national emergencies. A long time. Why? Because Congress can't do it. You might say that the Constitution gave it to them, Article 1, Section 8, in the enumerated powers and all that stuff. But Congress then hands it off. Now, you may not like that. Rand Paul doesn't like that at all. He wants Congress to take it back. Well, Congress can go do that. They can go take it back if they want to. They can pass any new legislation and do it. They won't. But they could. And until they do, this is the law. And Trump was following it. Now, the 1917 Trading with the Enemy Act authorized the president. Since 1917, we had this, said the president could regulate the importation of foreign goods during wartime. Later, Congress amended that to allow the president to regulate importation, okay? So they got rid of the, quote, during wartime, end quote. So now you can just regulate importation of foreign goods, not just in wartime, but during any other period of national emergency, as the president declares. Oh, that comes from the First War Powers Act back in 1941. Then in 1971, President Nixon invoked that the TWEA, and he imposed tariffs in response to a balance of payments deficit, a trade deficit. We're paying more than we're making. He goes, oh crap. Finding that a prolonged decline in the international monetary reserves of the United States had seriously threatened the nation's trade and international competitive position, and thus its security. Nixon declared a national emergency, and he said 10% tariffs on eligible imports. He did that in 1971. And then in Yoshida, this court's predecessor upheld the tariff. And this court's like brand new. I think they got created or were brought in like 1980. We'll see where this goes. But they had morphed into a bunch of different things over the years. Now in the 1970s, Congress revised the framework. They enacted 2 statutes. They came out with the National Emergencies Act. It authorizes the president to declare an emergency for all the purposes of all acts of Congress can exercise these powers. The NEA does not substantively limit the president's determination of when a national emergency exists. Instead, Congress retained oversight of those determinations through its power to terminate a declared emergency through a joint resolution. Okay, so if Congress says that Trump's tariffs are bad, Congress can do something about it. But why can one private company just sue in this court and then invalidate the tariffs nationwide? That's a mechanism to challenge Trump's orders. There's a mechanism to challenge Trump's orders. It's called Congress. All they have to do is pass a joint resolution. Otherwise, an emergency to terminate is coming from the president. Now, second, Congress amended the TWEA by removing the president's peacetime emergency powers under that act and replaced them with the IEEPA. Here's what they put in this new law back in 1971. The IEEPA's operative provision authorizes the president. Here's the law cited. 50 U.S. Code Section 1702A1B says, regulate any importation of any property in which any foreign country or national thereof has any interest or any property subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. Dang, that's pretty broad. Seems like you could drive a truck through that. Now, Section 1702's language draws directly from the prior statute. The Supreme Court said in this case, Dames versus Moore, they said it is essentially the same as it was under the TWEA, but the new law provides that the President's Section 1702 authority, quote, may be exercised to deal with any unusual and extraordinary threat which has its source in whole or substantial part outside the United States to the national security, foreign policy, or economy of the United States, if the president declares a national emergency with respect to that threat. And guess what? That's what Trump did. And under that provision, you may not like Trump's tariffs. You may think they're bad policy. They might hurt all the Democratic pocketbooks, and all the funding being cut off to their grifting friends is going to hurt their bottom line. But that doesn't mean that it's illegal. And it's not outside of what is plainly written in text here. Trump says this in appeal. All right, these cases concern various presidential emergency declarations and actions taken by Trump to address these emergencies. Let's go through them. Canada and Mexico, boom. Trump comes in January 20. Golden age is upon us. The president declares the flow of contraband drugs like fentanyl and the resulting public HEALTH crisis to be a national emergency. And the trade court said, no, we're okay if your kids are getting KILLED by fentanyl. Not a big deal. It's not actually a national emergency, and tariffs aren't going to do anything to stop it. Oh, thanks, Judge. Did anybody elect you for that? Are you in a position where you can investigate any of this? No. You're not a political person or a political branch. You're a court of law. These are not decisions for you to make. Saying, the president expanded the scope of this emergency to cover conduct by the Canadians and Mexican governments who are poisoning our people. The president invoked his power under the IEEPA, 25% on Canada and Mexico, saying, get your affairs in order down there and stop bringing in the precursors to fentanyl. So then the president subsequently issued additional executive orders that paused the tariffs, right? Citing their immediate steps to alleviate the rolls later even exempted from tariffs all Canadian and Mexican goods that qualify for duty-free entry under the agreements. So the tariffs were used as a tool. They were imposed. They were lifted as the objectives were achieved. Canada, Mexico, they have conversations and agreements, and the tariffs are working to create an outcome. Oh, the court says, you can't do that anymore because we're the president now. So, China, they say, Trump came in. The president further expanded the scope of this national emergency. Says, guess what? Also covers China. Now he found that the PRC, People's Republic of China, had subsidized or otherwise incentivized chemical companies to export fentanyl and other precursor chemicals to produce synthetic opioids that are sold in the United States, KILLING, everybody. The PCR provides even support and safe havens to transnational criminal organizations that launder the revenues from the production, shipment, and sale of these opioids. That many companies go to great lengths to avoid law enforcement, and they bring in fentanyl and other drugs, and they're unaliving people all across America. Now, as with Canada and Mexico, Trump says to the Court of Appeals, Trump determined that PRC's conduct constitutes an unusually and extraordinary threat, which has its source in substantial part outside the United States, to the national security, foreign policy, and economy of the country. And so Trump came out and issued a 10% duty on most goods imported from China. And then that number went up to 20%. He says, oh, you still got fentanyl coming in? Oh, you don't like that 10%? How about 20? How about that? Then he imposed duties on low-value imports because they hide their substances in these little smaller packages to avoid detection that then are shipped over here. So then Trump said, all right, look, we're going to also do reciprocal tariffs. We've got Canada, Mexico, China, then reciprocal tariffs. Trump came out, declared an additional emergency. He says, you know, our prior politicians have been morons, and they have not done anything to bring in reciprocity in our trade deals. We're just getting hollowed out. We print money. We buy foreign crap. We have no industry anymore. We've got no good jobs. Everybody said, learn to code. And the whole country is tired of it. So Trump is rebalancing these agreements. Desperate tariff rates, non-tariff barriers, and all of these things are suppressing domestic wages and consumptions. They're causing trade deficits. It's bad. The president further determined that large and persistent annual trade good deficits have led to the hollowing out of our manufacturing base and a litany of other serious harms caused because of a lack of reciprocity. Because we just get hollowed out. We're just an economic zone. Who cares about actually building things in America as long as they can just send us some cheap crap that falls apart in 2 days? No problem. The president accordingly acted to rebalance the global trade flows, imposed 10% tariffs, also imposed country-specific tariffs as well. Then, on April 9th, Trump suspended most country-specific tariffs for 90 days. Again, a tool. Come negotiate with us, and you won't get hit with this. But he did raise the tariff imports for the Chinese PRC because they retaliated against us. He suspended the tariff against them for 90 days because they are working to facilitate the national emergency. Whew. Now, I'm leaving this from Robert Govia, and I'm cutting to the Secretary of State Marco Rubio announcement. Was it yesterday that all Chinese visas will be aggressively pulled? Yeah, you can best believe that much is going on regarding that, because early this morning, right after that announcement, which was definitely unusual, then on Truth Social, President Trump at Real Donald Trump posted early this morning, from May 30th, 2 weeks ago, China was in grave economic danger. The very high tariffs I set made it virtually impossible for China to trade, and he put trade all in caps. Capital T, capital R, capital A, capital D, capital E. Virtually impossible for China to trade into the United States marketplace, which is, by far, #1 in the world. We went, in effect, cold turkey, and he put cold turkey in caps, with China. And it was devastating for them. Many factories closed, and there was, to put it mildly, quote, civil unrest, end quote. I saw what was happening and didn't like it, for them, not for us. I made a fast deal with China in order to save them from what I thought was going to be a very bad situation, and I didn't want to see that happen. Because of this deal, everything quickly stabilized and China got back to business as usual. Everybody was happy. That is the good news. The bad news is that China, perhaps not surprisingly to some, has totally violated its agreement with us, all in caps, has totally violated its agreement with us. So much for being Mr. Nice Guy. And Mr. Nice Guy is all in caps. Yeah, so, woo, something's really happening. It's something, I don't know if I'm going to be able to put it out today. I'm just so busy, and I already put out 2 big reports today. But this is also a question leading to something I'm going to talk about probably tomorrow and put out there. It's a kind of a key to understanding what's going on with Harvard and why they're getting hammered so much. And there's another reason underneath that I won't mention here. But it's really very strongly foundational to why Harvard, like many other Ivy Leagues, pretty much almost deserve to be dismantled for what they've done, for how treasonous and how in alignment with crimes against humanity they have been. Yeah, really a lot of stuff. So I hope you like this content. I found it very interesting. Please like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Why not join my YouTube channel? Why not? I end all of my clips with a closing prayer, which is in Sanskrit and Telugu. And what I'm saying is, God bless all beings in all worlds. And I truly do mean that. For example, just this last few minutes of what I've talked about here on this clip, we know that we the people of China are not the Chinese Communist Party. We the people of China, like humanity across the board on this earth realm, has suffered greatly underneath a very dark cult, satanic, totalitarian rule. And anyone saying nobody wants that for China. They've got to stand up and get rid of that mess themselves, though. Honestly, that's a big task, but it's got to be done. I saw so many, and you can look at them yourself too. There's tons of them also on YouTube. So many live streaming and so many channels that are showing what's actually going on inside of China. The truth about it, and showing behind the few glitzy cities and high rises and things they love to show people and just keep your attention on. Not showing you what really most of the country looks like and how the population is nowhere near 1.4 billion. It's much smaller than that. And the reasons why for that even go beyond the one child per family rule that was instituted and then repealed by Mao. I just really want the best for we the people across this earth realm. But this is the time for accountability. This is the great cleanup. This is the great washing of this evil and this dark terribleness. It's cleanup time. It is. It's the new earth time. So here is the closing prayer in Sanskrit and Telugu. And what I'm saying is, God bless all beings in all worlds. Om Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Yes, we're all dreaming and looking forward to peace, peace, peace once this great cleanup is completed. How wonderful. God bless you and yours. I'm sending much love and big hugs to you and yours. I'll see you when I see you. Bye-bye for now.